right, in this video, we're going to continue on talking about lists and tuples and a bit about sequences as well, a bit about strings as well, because strings are also part of the sequences that we have. Going back to the definition very briefly, a list and a tuple both are linear data structure of variable lengths allowing mixed type elements. The main difference between lists and tuples are lists are mutable, tuples are immutable. So the word mutable versus immutable, what it means is lists are changeable. You can modify them after you create them. Tuples, after you create them, is set. You need to reassign. You need to delete the previous one and recreate a new list if you want to make any changes to your tuple. But lists, you can say, okay, I have this box with different sections, and I already have the list, I already have all of the values, and I want to only change the fifth value in my list. You just take it out and put something new in it. So that is the part that we mean by mutable. You can change it, you can add the stuff to it, you can change the size, you can delete, insert different things inside the list after you create it, without reassigning or without deleting the previous one, creating a new list. But with tuples or any other data types that we learned so far, if you want to change the value inside your box, you have to reassign it and you have to create a whole new thing out of it. Okay, so let's go back to our Python environment. And what we are going to focus on in this video is we are going to focus on different sequences, and strings, lists, and tuples. All three are part of sequences that we are going to talk about. Again, with sequence, that means you have ordering. You have a specific item that come in a specific order and they're connected to each other. So you have the first item, second item, third item, and so on and so forth. And all of them have that property in them. So with a string, you have a bunch of characters that are set next to each other. With lists, you have a bunch of elements that are in your list, and same thing with tuples. Okay, in this video, what we are going to focus on is we are going to focus on how to access different elements inside your sequence. Accessing the elements inside in the sequence. And again, all three of those data types are sequences. Okay, so let's see how it is done. In the last video, we talked about the indexing on a sequence. Okay, so let's create a simple sequence. I'm going to say my first sequence is going to be a list. And you can have your values in it, so you don't have to have exactly what I put here. So let's have these three values, 6, 1, and 4. Again, right now I have only integers. You can have integers, float, strings, tuples, lists inside a list as well, okay? Because you can have mixed type variables or mixed type values inside your sequence. Okay, so we have the sequence here. I created it is type list. And the reason that we know it is type list is because of those square brackets. We know that as soon as we see the square brackets, we know it is type list. If I create another sequence, let's say sequence 2, and I put parentheses, if I have the exact same numbers, it doesn't matter. As soon as I see the parentheses, I know this is type tuple. And then I'm going to create another sequence, sequence 3, and I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to put these values in it. So in all three of these sequences, I have values 6, 1, and 4. But the way that I created them are different, and that means they are different data types. So the first one in line, let's look at the line numbers. In line 10, I have a list. In line 11, I have a tuple. And in line 12, I have a string. And the reason I don't have, in these two, I have the commas, but in sequence 3, I don't have comma. The reason is the comma is not part of the values that you have. It's just separating the elements inside your sequence. So that is just for separation, kind of separating different items from each other. So for that reason, I did not include the commas inside the string value that I have. Okay, you can go ahead and print them. So I can print sequence 1, sequence 2, and your sequence 3. Yeah. So we can do that and see the result. So here we go. This is the first one, which is type list, tuple, and then this is your string. Okay. Now, we're going to focus on accessing the elements inside your sequence. To access the elements inside the sequence, we need the index number that we talked about. Remember, in Python, most programming languages, we have 0 indexing. That means the first item that you have, the 6 that you have in all 3, are going to have the index number 0. That means the value is associated with a specific number, and that number starts from 0. So if I want to access any value inside the sequence, I'm going to need that index number, okay? So if I need this value, I know, okay, this is index number 0, index number 1. So I need to get index number 1 to access that element. If I need this item, I know it has the index number 2 in it, or it has index number 2, so I need to call that index number to get the value from it. So to access the element, to retrieve a value, for all of that, you're going to need the index number in the sequence that you have, okay? So let's try that now. So let's say we want to get the first value from all of these sequences. To do that, you need 2 pieces of information. The first one is you need to know the name of your sequence. What is the name of your sequence? Here you have sequence 1, sequence 2, sequence 3. You might have different names. That's okay. That's the name that you have for your sequences. So that's the name that you need, the name of that variable for that sequence. The second piece of information that you need is what index number you want. What index number you want to access. So at this case, let's just start with 0, and then we are going to move up to get index number 1, index number 2 in this case, and then if you have more items, then you go up and then just retrieve or access those elements as well. Okay, now let's put the name of the sequence and the index number together. So whenever you want to access something, we always use brackets. So I'm going to say, okay, this is the name of my sequence. From this sequence, I want to access index number 0. From sequence 2, I want to access index number 0. And from sequence 3, I want to access index number 0. So as you see, for all 3 types, string, list, and tuple, I'm using a square bracket to access the element. Right? To accessing the item from a sequence, we always use a square bracket. So I have a list, square bracket, index number 0. I have a tuple, square bracket, index number 0. I have a string, square bracket, index number 0. So let's go ahead and run it. What I expect to see is I want to see 6 from each one of these sequences, because that is what we have in index number 0 in all 3 of them. And then if you change that to another index number, let's try index number 1 and then run it, it's going to give us 1 because that is what you have at index number 1 in all 3. And then we want index number 2. And that is going to give us the last element inside those sequences. Okay, if you try to reach something that doesn't exist, let's go 20, for instance. 20, index number 20 does not exist. We are only having 3 values inside those sequences, and index number 20 doesn't exist. We don't have that many values. So if we run this one, it's going to give us this error message. List index out of range. This is one of the very common error messages that you're going to get throughout Python programming whenever you're using a list. So just know that you're trying, whenever you see this message, know that you're trying to reach something that does not exist. So you're trying to reach beyond the size of your list. And that is a great information because you can come back and check the boundaries of what you're reaching, and if you're going beyond the size of your sequence. Okay? So that is the main thing about how to access different elements. inside your sequences. And as you see, it is exactly the same for all three of them.